For me, I don't like to just meet my goal, but I like to exceed it. I like to do better than I set out to do. So I think you just got to try. And, and like being an entrepreneur, take those leap of faith. Really look at, something might seem daunting, but once you get into it, you might see that you figure it out more easily than you think, or you might enjoy it more than you thought you would. So yeah, don't be afraid to try something new. We don't get to just be in the world, but the world should be a better place for us having been in it.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just have a favor to ask before we begin. If you've been enjoying these conversations and want more stories that redefine success, please do us a massive favor and hit the subscribe button over on our YouTube channel. It literally takes 2 seconds to do and is completely free. It's a small gesture, but it makes a massive difference for us as it really helps us to grow the show. And with that, let's get into the episode. All right, welcome back to the Quest for Success podcast. And thanks so much for tuning in once again. We're really excited because today on the show, we're joined by Kirk Hardie, who is the lead guide and also the owner at Red Tail Adventures. It's going to be a very different story and I'm really looking forward to unpacking.
Yeah, I had the privilege of meeting Kirk at the Harvard Business School. And again, we were never been on the same living group, but we had some dealings, especially at the negotiation table. And we had so much fun. And seems like I know Kirk for a long time. And thank you, Kirk, for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here. And I would also add that I'm the vice chairman of Hallador Investment Advisors as well.
Excellent.
Amazing.
Yeah, we'll dive into both sides of your story there. So,
Yep.
Kirk, before we begin, we need to understand a very fundamental question. And that is, what does success actually mean to you?
What is success? Success means setting a goal and achieving it. If I'm saying I'm going to do something, actually being able to fall through. And for me, I don't like to just meet my goal, but I like to exceed it. I like to do better than I set out to do. So that's my definition of success there.
Very simple.
And currently, what is your goal? What is that thing you'll set out that you're trying to achieve?
What am I trying to achieve? Well, we're doing a transition now from my father, who's been running Hallador Investment Advisors in some different iterations since the 70s. So we're doing a transition. So success to me is my dad handing off the business to me and me, the business not having any hiccups during that transition, but then also continuing to grow beyond. So carrying on what my dad has started and seeing it be successful beyond where he left it.
Okay. Really carrying on that family legacy. I love that. And I suppose for us to understand the man who we're talking to, we need to understand a little bit of your early context. Can you take us through your kind of early upbringing and especially how you think your parents influenced who you've become?
Oh, in my early upbringing, I thought we'd start with like business stuff, but we'll start when I was young. Well,
Yeah.
Well, actually, my great grandfather started a newspaper company
Oh, wow.
back in I think it was the 1920s. So, anyways, so growing up, we would have board meetings for the company, and when I was younger, I would go with my dad down to Southern California. I wouldn't go to the meetings, but I knew they were happening.
Yeah.
And then the dinner conversation afterwards would be like, this happened in the meeting, that happened in the meeting. So it's one of those things where what was happening in the business was being talked about at the dinner table. So very early on, I started to know what was happening with business, how some decisions were being made, and whatnot. And it was funny. My sister at a young age always said like, well, you're good with numbers. I always thought that you would take over for dad. But for a long period there, I didn't think I would take over. So it's.
And what is the family business like that you grew up around?
Well, there was the newspaper company, but then my dad we had a family office, and my dad always did investments through that. A lot of family offices outsource the investment stuff, but my dad was doing it in-house. A lot of venture capital type stuff. Right now, we have three funds that one is a balanced fund, your traditional 60/40 stocks and bonds fund that has money managers doing it. Then we also have a fund called the Alternative Assets Fund where we do a lot of direct investments and take some riskier bets on companies. But then we have a third fund called the Hallador Opportunity Fund where we're actually doing that in-house. We have a staff or team in-house that's out raising money and doing investments, and it's a concentrated portfolio, only like typically 10 to 12 investments in that portfolio.
Yeah. So, Kirk, when you're young, you wanted to work in your dad's or your grandfather's business, or you had other interests?
I had other interests. I have my undergraduate degree and my master's degree are actually in ecology.
Wow.
So, for a period there, I thought that I was going to be a high school science teacher. I started a master's in in education, and I was a substitute teacher. But when I was doing that, there was a lot of, kids with issues that you had to keep track of every day, and I felt like I spent more time trying to figure out how to like keep track of the kids than it was actually teaching. So I decided I didn't want to do that. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll go into investments with my dad. So I went and I worked for a summer doing investments with my dad, and he said, "Oh, you're good at this. You should keep doing it." And I was like, I think I'll go do something else.
Yeah.
so, from there, I ended up. I actually got an internship at a place called the Wolf Education and Research Center in Idaho. And I spent 4 or 5 months living in a wall tent in the middle of the wilderness in Idaho. And there was a captive pack of wolves, like, I don't know, there might have been like 6 or 7 of them. And I would have to walk the enclosure every morning to make sure the fence wasn't torn up so that they could get out or something could get in. And then, every once in a while, we get a donation of like a cow or a horse, and we'd have to cut it up and then go feed the wolves.
Wow.
What an experience.
How old are you then?
Oh, that was probably my mid to late 20s when I did
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Do you know what made you decided to get into that sort of path? What was the turning point? Not.
Um, yeah, so growing up, I mean, not my great grandfather, my grandpa on my mom's side was a superintendent of a school district. And so he had summers off, and he would spend
Mm.
2 months of the summer up at Chester in the Sierra Nevadas, fly fishing for trout. And then he'd spend 1 month on the coastal range hunting for deer. And so we would go visit him in both these places, and I just love being outdoors. Um, also my dad got into scuba diving when I was younger, so we did a lot of scuba diving trips, and we always had, the card of like, here's the fish that you're going to see under the water. So we'd be underwater looking for the fish, trying to identify them. But also, my grandmother bred German shepherds, and so we always had a dog,
Oh,
and she always had 4 dogs. So, and I don't know, I just gravitated to animals. So I enjoyed being around the dogs, and so I think my interest in dogs led to wolves. But then, actually, where my path led from there was an ex of mine said, you like lists so much. I really think you'd enjoy bird watching. And I was like, no, I was like, bird watching? No, I don't think so. She's like, no, 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 really. So she didn't take my advice, and she gave me a field guide for Christmas. And so
all right.
it was like the week after Christmas, I'm out walking the dogs, and a hawk flies overhead. I look up at it and I'm like, huh, I wonder if I could figure out what that is. And from there, I was hooked. I loved bird watching. So, um, it wolves were kind of the entry point, but birds became more interesting because birds are so much more accessible than mammals. You
Mm.
can go out and find birds almost anywhere, kind of thing, whereas mammals can be really hard and secretive to find. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then how did that transpire? Did you pivot into bird watching and that became a hobby or a career? Or what happened next?
yeah, well, after I finished that internship, I ended up moving to Central Oregon, and when I moved there, I happened to see an advertisement saying birding by ear classes on Wednesday mornings. And so every Wednesday morning I'd get up, 7 a.m. and go out birding for like an hour, hour and a half, learning to identify the birds by ear. And then the guy that ran that was like, you're picking this up pretty quick. He's like, I have some work where we need to go do some surveys to identify what birds are in different patches of the forest. So he hired me to do that. Um, he actually also hired me to go do a study on Lewis's woodpeckers. And so I went out and, measured, like tracked down these woodpeckers, these green kind of, but they're almost like a rose burgundy red color and like silver on the throat, really cool looking woodpecker. So I go find them all throughout the forest in central Oregon. And then the data from that was used to create the first nesting boxes that were successful in the whole United States for this
Wow.
bird. So that's like my one claim to bird research fame. But
Yeah.
so so from there, I just got hooked on the idea of doing that. So like I went to Colorado and was on a field crew for a type of bird called the Gunnison sage grouse. I did bird surveys in the Sierra Nevada. Um, so it's just something that became really not just a passion, but also a way for me to be engaged with things.
Yeah. And, given your background was, and your family's background is in investments, did you ever see yourself ending up like this? And did your family support this kind of decision?
I did not end up seeing myself coming back to investments. That was a change. But my parents, I think, my dad always had the hope that I would work for the family business, that I would continue that.
Yeah.
But he never pressured me.
Yeah.
He always let it be wherever my interest took me, he wanted to see me do that. So, and I think that probably came from, his generation really did feel the pressure of you should work for the newspaper company. And if you didn't work for the newspaper company, like you weren't up to snuff kind of thing. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happened? How did you make this bird watching thing into a career path?
Yeah, so I got my master's in ecology from the University of Nevada, Reno, because I wanted to know the Lake Tahoe area right next to Reno a lot better. So I did that, and instead of doing a field study, I did a high school curriculum on the ecology of the Great Basin, which is almost the entire state of Nevada is in the Great Basin. So, I took high school students out, taught them how to collect data, and then had to defend my curriculum in front of a committee. So after that, my advisor said, one of my previous students wants to start an environmental nonprofit up at Tahoe. You should probably talk to him. So he and I got together and we chatted and eventually agreed that we would partner and start a nonprofit. And so we started the Tahoe Institute for Natural Science. And, it was one of those things where it's like, a typical startup, right? Like, who's going to do the website? Oh, he's going to do that. Like, all right,
Yeah.
I guess I'll
Yeah.
take the books.
Yeah.
So we divvied things up and, built it up to seeing, I think it was almost 5,000 students every year by the time I left. But we were doing science education in schools, field trips, summer camps. Then he was doing wildlife research mostly on birds, and then we were also doing nature experiences for the public. So a lot of bird walks, wildflower walks, but basically getting people more connected to the Tahoe area. So, but after 7 years of doing that, it
Wow.
became apparent the limitations of my partner, and it just became time to move on. So,
Yeah.
I made the difficult decision to leave there, and then it's like, well, what comes after that? So I enjoyed taking people bird watching, and in the meantime, I had been doing about one bird watching tour a year for the Audubon Society of Portland, where I used to work. And so that would be like anywhere from 5 to 7 days, taking 7 to 14 people around cool places in the United States, just looking for birds. Sometimes internationally, I've been to Ecuador. I'm going to Japan next summer.
Wow.
Wow.
So I started a company called Red Tail Adventures so that I
Yeah.
could take people bird watching around Tahoe, but then also contract with the Audubon Society of Portland to continue doing those bird tours. Um,
Yeah.
And going back to what you were doing with education, I'm really fascinated by that now because I see a lot of young kids and this generation, they're just so stuck inside looking at their screens. How important do you think, what you were doing, getting kids out into nature and exploring and seeing the natural world, how important do you think that was?
I think it's very important. Like when I used to live in Portland, Oregon, and I ran a summer camp for underprivileged children. And one time I took them from Portland to Mount Rainier in Washington. So we had to drive over the Columbia River. And when we got up on the bridge, a student looked out and goes, "Oh, is that the ocean?" And it was like, "Oh, like this river is less than a mile from your house, and you didn't even like, you don't venture that far to even see it." So there's connections like that, getting kids connected beyond their little bubble of where they live, to realize what's more around them. And if you don't know what's there, it's harder to take care of, right? So I think
Mm.
that's the important part of it.
And how important do you think, it sounded like you traveled a fair bit in your early life. How important do you think that was into shaping you and your mindset as well?
I think that was also very important. I loved traveling very early on. My parents one year decided to get me a suitcase for my birthday because I loved traveling so much. Um, so they identified that, and but I think also the traveling with my family just opened my eyes of you know growing up in California. I had a very comfortable lifestyle, and then go out and see other parts of the world and realize, oh, like other people don't have it as easy as I do or as Californians do, people from the US. So it was really eye-opening to get out and see the world. And it's something that I took that, and I want to share that with people now. So,
Yeah. So you were a environment educator.
yes.
What exactly that means?
I was teaching people about nature. So
Okay.
sometimes it was a presentation, but most of the time it would be on a walk, a field trip for schools. But getting kids out of the classroom and not just teaching them nature, but actually showing them what's there. Um, but the same thing for adults. These bird watching tours that I do now, it's helping people to better understand the locations that we go to, see lots of cool birds, but also learn a little
Yep.
bit about what are some of the local struggles of, I led a tour to Eastern Canada this summer, and we went to a demonstration forest where they were doing experimental logging to help better manage the forest there so that they could support the timber industry while also keeping the environment healthy there. So things
Mm-hmm.
like that.
And I read on your website that your guiding philosophy is to give your clients the aha moment. Can you share like any client stories of like what that aha moment was?
Well, this summer, actually this September, I led a tour to Utah, the Great Salt Lake there, and then into eastern Nevada. And if you're not familiar with Nevada, it's one of the driest states in the United
Yeah.
States, and it's a big state with not a big population, so a lot of empty spaces out there. But a lot of people don't have a very positive view of it. It's Las Vegas, it's Reno,
Yeah.
it's casinos,
Yeah.
and then it's
Yeah.
just desert with nothing.
Mm.
But so I took these people birding there, and we went and saw caves. We went and saw cool birds. I took some people up. There was a bird introduced from the Himalayas, where I
Wow.
took three clients. We got up at 3:30 in the morning and hiked in the dark up to this cirque in the mountains, and we got to see three Himalayan snowcocks. But on this tour, um, one of the people at the end said, I didn't realize how beautiful Nevada was. And so that's the aha moment, that it's not just that there's birds in Nevada, it's that there's also this natural beauty that most people have missed. And I got to share that with these other people, and they saw it. They understood what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I remember going to Vegas, and then we did a helicopter tour to the Grand Canyon. Yeah, it was amazing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's Las Vegas, which, it's its own little bubble of
Yeah,
what goes on there. But outside Las Vegas, there's actually some very cool nature places to go check out, like Red Rocks Canyons just near
yep,
Las Vegas. So
yeah,
you can
yeah,
go visit a lot and see those.
yeah. So Kirk, so you did this as a education thing, and then you decided to make it your own business, right? So
Yep.
what's the turning point that you decided to get into more entrepreneurship and starting this as a your profession?
But after starting the nonprofit,
Yeah,
having a taste of, I had a partner there,
yeah,
but there's challenges with the partner, right? Like I mean, just like any relationship, you've got to
yeah,
work through things, and there'll be struggles and whatnot. But um, I liked setting my own schedule and whatnot, so um, it was just one of those things that naturally came to me that like I want to be able to control my schedule, and it was shortly after that that I started the Red Tail Adventures. That my dad was trying to think of like, all right, well, if I'm not passing my business to my kids, what do I do next? Do I do an
yeah,
ESOP? Like, what do I do? And as soon as he brought that up, and I was like, I was no longer, working 50, 60 hours a week at a nonprofit, right? So I was like, well, hold on. Maybe I could learn more about business, and I could have my guiding business, which wouldn't be full time, so that I could be with my family more. Um, and then, I could learn more about the family business, which is supporting not just myself, but the family and the legacy, everything, we talked about in the beginning. So, I raised my hand and said, I'd like to pursue this.
And what was that transition like once you said, yeah, I want to sub me in, coach. I want to learn a bit more.
Yeah, well, as good as a businessman as my dad is, he can be a little bit hard to follow. So fortunately, we had a family business advisor that came in, a consultant that came in, and he's helped to set some. He calls them goalposts, or milestones. And so, going to the Harvard program with Jam was one of those. My dad said, you worked at a nonprofit, but like it's not quite the same as the business world. And so I went and did this program, and my dad was actually in OPM 11.
yeah. I was gonna ask you why did you actually go to Harvard OPM? Now you provide the answer. Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, my dad did that. I think I was like 12 when he graduated from that, and so. But I
wow.
remember, like I'd talk to him, and be like, "Oh, I went to a Boston Celtics game, or Bruins game, or something." And so, I knew about it, and what he said was, it really helped him to refine his business skills and change the way that he approached things, and that he felt like he was much more successful afterwards. So he said, doing that program will make me much more comfortable in you taking over the family business.
And did you see that change for yourself? Like after OPM, what were the kind of key takeaways?
Um, well, I like to quote one of our professors, Professor Raman, where the end of every year he would always say, "There's
Yep.
two things we want you to take away from this. One is humility, the other is confidence." And I do believe that it's significantly boosted my confidence. I've sat in board meetings where I would speak up before, but I just felt much more comfortable speaking up. Like it was my place. This was I don't know, like it was flowing, like
Yeah.
like so I've seen it play out in the boardroom, that I feel like I can ask more pointed questions, deeper questions, and things from that experience.
Yeah, yeah. Coming from bird watching experience to business, did you see any experience like doing that or organizing tours helping you in the finance business?
Um,
Any
well,
relationship?
yeah, part of my role with the family business is also to educate the
Yeah.
next generation, and also I serve as a liaison between the executives of the company and the family members. So because of that, the education background I have was a natural fit for that role within what I do. Um, but as far as the business itself, I think having my master's in education or ecology, I was able to, you know, pull things together to be like, I don't know this. What do I need to know? Who do I need to talk to? What kind of information do I need to gather? So it's not the same as putting together a presentation or a bird walk, but it was still the same idea of I need to gather information so that I can show up to the board meeting and be prepared.
When you're going through a bird watching tours, right, and you're going through a lot of adventure, right? Do you see that in the boardroom that you have some adventure? You have to, adapt it to different situations.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like there's a lot going on, and like we have a portfolio of companies we've
Yeah.
invested in, so it's outdoor apparel to a an energy company to hearing aids. Like there's a lot of difference in there, so it kind of bounces all over, and every company needs something different. This one needs you know a better sales program. This one needs cash to develop the next round of innovation. So there really is it's not the same as exploring, say, another country or the mountains, but it's still exploring what makes this company tick. What is going to be that one thing that helps it get to the next level potentially.
And you mentioned there, you like to have a balance, especially to keep time for your family. How do you now working for Hallador, also doing Red Tail? How are you balancing and juggling all these things while keeping a strong family relationship as well?
Yeah, well, lots of conversations with my wife. You know, um, because right now I'm leading 2 to 3 multi-day tours a year, which that can pull me away from the house for anywhere from 7 to 14 days. But actually, when I go to Japan, I'll be gone for 22 days.
Wow.
Um, so it's one of those things where I'm like, I think I'll do Japan this year, but I might have to wait for the kids to be out of the house before I consider doing it again. Because there's so much that happens at home with their sports, with their horseback riding or basketball or cross country, whatever sports season it is, that I miss out if I'm away on those things. So, um, but there's that balance of, you know, how many people hire me to go do a half day or full day of bird watching in Tahoe versus, making sure I have time for the office work, to stay up on, you know, do I have a board meeting coming up? What's happening at the investment committee, meeting this month? Um, so it's one of those things where I think, fortunately, from more of an ownership standpoint, I control more of how much I'm involved at the company.
Yeah.
But there's still special projects that pop up here and there that I will take on and run myself. So um, there's always a balance there of trying not to take on too many things. Like I also serve on 2 nonprofit boards,
Wow.
and
You're a busy man.
right, they ask, can you chair this committee? And I have to say no. I've said no a few times now, just because I know that I don't have enough free time to balance the family and the 2 jobs.
And I know finance industry can be very hustle and bustle and very hardcore grind. As someone who's, a lover of nature, how do you balance those two things?
Well, I think that fortunately my dad has assembled a very good team. And so I really
Yeah.
enjoy the people at the investment company, and I get along very well with our CEO. And, one thing that I did enjoy about working at the nonprofit was I like working with a team. The guiding business I do is largely myself. So, everything I do is my own decision. There's not a lot of a social interaction unless somebody hires me to go out. Um, but at the investment company, it's working with a team. And, you know, if I'm doing my job well, I feel like they are out doing better with the companies we invested with. They have more time to focus there. They have more opportunities to make those companies successful. So it's really that balance of, having
Yeah.
my company, my bird watching company, where I can make all the decisions, and then having the investment firm where I get to work with a team and plan things. And, and they say, we're doing a marketing, dinner. We'd like you to show up.
Yeah, yeah, and also, right, because they are so different, you probably feel, going to a bird watching tour keep you more refreshed when you're coming back to the boardroom. You're more freshed.
Exactly. I mean, every morning I wake up and I take my dogs for a walk, and it can be anywhere from a mile to 2.5 miles. But I'm also bird watching during that time, so it helps to refreshen me for the day, so I can focus on kids or getting to the office and whatever needs to happen. But it's definitely that I have that balance of I can sit in front of a computer and work. I can sit in board meetings and different things, but I need to have my time outside that allows me to focus more effectively in meetings and things.
Yeah.
And I want to know, like, given that you've had, a very diverse journey so far, what are you hoping for your kids?
Well, I hope is that they can find passions that they love that will lead to work that'll be fulfilling for them. So, that I hope that they see what the many generations of Hardys have done to provide a very nice lifestyle takes work by every generation, and that it doesn't have to necessarily be work that the family does, but that you find meaningful work that gives you joy. And I like to say also that it's we don't get to just be in the world, but the world should be a better place for us having been in it.
Absolutely. At Hardy's dinner table, what kind of a discussion that you have?
Oh man. um You know,
And
a lot of homework discussions. Is the homework done? But we like to talk about trips. Where should we go for our next adventure?
yeah,
Um, I think Hawaii won out this year, so spring break will be in Hawaii. Um, but that my wife is also a family business consultant,
oh
so
wow,
There you
we can
go.
be talking anywhere from bird watching company to investments to what are families dealing with and struggling with.
yeah, yeah.
And over your journey, have there, other than your father, have there been any mentors that have helped guide you along the way?
Yes, I've had a few mentors along the way. When I was at the nonprofit, um, a good friend of mine was the CEO of the community foundation, and so with that, I was able to go to her, and she actually came from, I forget what industry she was in before, but she did some manufacturing type stuff before and stuff. So she knew a lot about business. So whenever I struggled with something in the nonprofit, I could go to her and be like, "Here's what I'm trying to figure out." But then also a family friend was a business consultant, and so she would come in pro bono and do retreats for the board and help us come up with plans and think about things we weren't thinking about. So, I've been fortunate to have mentors like that. And then currently our family business consultant, I meet with him weekly, and just having somebody that's you know been consulting with families for I think like 15, 20 years, to be able to have somebody to bounce ideas off, to ask questions, to figure things out, that has experience with other family businesses has been tremendous. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely having the mentors out there to help guide you, that are removed from the unit that you're focused on all the time, can see it from a different perspective.
Yeah, and now you're coming back to the family business, and obviously there's a lot of experienced people in that organization. And how do you kind of work with them? I mean, some of the stuff maybe is new to you, right? But how do you kind of lead that team working with some experienced people been there for a long time?
Yeah, well, I go back to what Professor Rahman said, being humble.
Yeah.
that um, there's some decisions there that are more ownership type decisions, and trying to separate out what's really that strategic, what do the owners want to do with the company versus what does the CEO and his staff need to do on the day-to-day stuff to keep things going. So, but as I said, growing up at the dinner table, my dad talked a lot about business, and so I think it was one of those things where, like, I have a mind that kind of grasps that stuff easily, fortunately, but also just hearing my dad talk about things growing up, I didn't realize how much I actually picked up from him
Yep.
until I started a nonprofit. Um, so I think with that, you know, there's certainly aspects of it that I don't know, but we talk about staying in your lane,
Yep.
knowing what you know and what you can influence or should influence. Um, versus speaking up in places you really don't know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And as I've said before, your career has taken quite a few turns. I'm in a similar boat myself. Studied engineering, now in finance, and still figuring it out. What advice do you have for people who are in that similar sort of journey of not really sure where they're going?
Oh man, well, I think you just got to try. And and like being an entrepreneur. I mean, when I started a nonprofit, I was fortunate that I had a partner,
Yeah.
right? That there was somebody that, like, we could lean on each other to make it happen. But now I feel like I could go off and do that on my own. But take those leap of faiths.
Mhm.
Really look at, something might seem daunting, but once you get into it, you might see that you figure it out more easily than you think, or you might enjoy it more than you thought you would.
Mm.
So yeah, don't be afraid to try something new.
Yeah. Yeah. So, coming to your dad's business, and do you see anything that you have to do differently to what your dad's been doing?
Yeah, well, my dad and I are very different personalities.
Yep.
So, my dad is a high energy, very social. Um, he's just always kind of working, type person. So, whereas I'm quieter, while I enjoy being social, after a certain
Yeah.
point, I'm kind of like, I need my quiet space now. So, but also, looking at it, my dad is his risk profile is much higher than mine. So, when it
Yep.
comes to investments, he's more apt to try something that, could have a huge return, but has a bigger potential downside than I would take. Um, but something that, I've talked with our CEO about, and, the company's talked about, is moving away from some of these big bets more towards cash flow positive businesses that are undervalued by the market at the moment, so that hopefully we can have big returns, but with more stable companies. Hopefully that's the right approach. It fits my personality more than my dad, so I think that'll be the natural transition to the next types of investments we're looking at.
And I really liked what you mentioned there, and I want to touch on it. It's like there's a common stereotype of leaders are the always outgoing, confident type. What have you learned being like the almost the quiet leader?
Oh well, I like to quote a negotiation we had at the Harvard Business School, where I was negotiating with a friend, and he said that afterwards it came out that I got one of the best deals in the class, but he's like, oh, like Kirk, like he's like the super nice guy, he's a pushover, like, I'm taking advantage of him here, and then he's like, wait, he actually got a much better deal than most everybody in the class. Um, so I think it's one of those things where people underestimate me because I might be quiet and I might not be speaking up, but I'm paying attention. I'm taking the information in, and I'm just figuring out what's the best course of action for me and when I should speak up. So
Yeah.
it's not that I always nail it, but but I do think that's my style.
Yeah, yeah. I had first-hand experience with negotiating with Kirk. Like he was the quietest guy. He didn't say a word, but at the end, he's the toughest negotiator. And it was fun, right? So, I mean, you have your own authentic style doing things.
When I was at the nonprofit, like there is, I met with some different school districts and foundations and things, and I remember sitting in a meeting with a few people and, um, exploring a new avenue that could be taken. And I had no idea where it would go, but I remember afterwards, the person from the foundation complimented me and like she was like, "Wow, like you really were good in there and like figuring out how you guys could position yourselves to be successful and portraying that to them." So again, I think that's part of the educator side of me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So from Harvard OPM, there's so many things that we all learn. Any special thing that you wanted to implement in your organization?
You know, the dashboard idea from Professor Doss.
Three
Um,
things.
right. What are the three things that really let you know the health and where your company is at the moment? And we have a startup company, a sawmill, where I've talked to our CEO is the chairman of that board, and I said, I'd like to come up with a dashboard there, but then also for the investment firm. You know, like my dad, he's been in this world for 50 years or whatever it is now. Um, and so he just kind of understands it, right? Like he doesn't need a meeting, he doesn't need check-ins, he doesn't need like the numbers. He can just kind of quickly look at it and understand where things are.
Yeah,
Whereas, you know, I liked what Professor Doss said that you want to know what's happening with your company, but if you have too many levers that you're watching, you'll start to micromanage your staff.
yeah,
And, you know, I feel like we hired them for a reason. I want to see them be successful with what they're doing, but at times I want to be able to say, like, hey, this is not looking like it's supposed to. Let's dive into that to understand it. So really the dashboard idea from Doss.
yeah, yeah. Talking about people, you mentioned not to micromanage people. What things that you, I mean, how important having a great organization culture and anything that you're doing to having a good organization culture in your company.
Yeah, well, my dad and our CEO have really set the culture there, but you know, my ability to influence that is with our CEO. That I'll sit down with him, usually weekly, um, but not every week. But sometimes things will come up with the staff, and I try you know, to give my opinion, but not tell him what to do.
Yeah,
Um, to say, hey, this is something that's come up. I see it from my perspective here. Like, what do you think of it? Is there a role I can play to help you with this?
yeah,
Um, but I do think having the good culture. I mean, we saw that in so many different case studies.
yeah,
Having
yeah.
the right culture, um, really goes a long ways towards making a company successful. So, um, yeah, but it's a little bit different when I'm the owner. I'm not the one that's implementing it, right? So,
Exactly.
um, how do I balance that of like not micromanaging the CEO, but like
Yeah,
if I see something,
yeah.
to share it in a way that allows him to decide what to do.
But okay, always you can influence, right? Where the direction.
Yep,
Yeah, yeah,
right. Well, even and um, something else I would say is we just had a retreat for the board of our company, and which is my mom, my brother, me, and my dad. And so, but we bring in a consultant and we talk about, my wife does this thing with families she works with called the Enneagram, which is typing your personality to show, you know, what are your tendencies, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your blind spots, and just, so that the board and family can better understand each other and how to work with each other. And, we hope that by the example from there, that'll trickle over into what happens with the company of, also getting that better understanding of each other.
And Kirk, it sounds like you've become the steward of your family's legacy. Do you feel any pressure taking on that responsibility?
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I mean, and going back to Harvard, I mean, the confidence that came from there, like I do feel much more confident in myself, and I do feel like I have a bigger network of people to reach out to if things come up, business wise. So, um, but yeah, there's definitely a pressure, and this goes back to my great grandfather, right? That he started a newspaper company that's led to this investment firm, and there's been a lot of work over the last 100 years to get the company to where it is. So, I would hope that when I take this off without my dad's influence, that I can continue that legacy of, supporting the family with the company down the road.
And is there anything you're trying to build upon?
Build upon. Um, you know, I think that, my dad is a very good businessman, but he doesn't always see the little nuances with personalities. So I hope to build on that, to be able to, I guess maybe the way to say this is, I developed a financial fluency program for the next generation. And so it's based on a lot of the things that my dad taught me over the years, but um, it's being a little bit more intentional with it. Of like, here's the age to bring this in. Here's different ideas that could be done. So just making it a little bit more purposeful, I would say,
Yeah.
but building on what he's already set the foundation of.
Yeah. Do you expect your children to carry forward this legacy, the family business?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, my children are 13 and 11 right now, so
Okay.
Too
um,
early.
my son is basketball and video games, and my daughter is horses. So, but there's three cousins out there too, and
Yeah.
I hope that one of them will be able to step into a stewardship role like I've done myself. Um, but I find it a little tough right now to really know where their passions will lead them and what their skill sets will be once they've matured.
Yeah. But do you wish they will
Yeah,
involve?
if it's something they want, I hope they do it. I want them to follow their passions. But I think that for myself, I'm fortunate that I have my bird watching business that it's my passion. But
Yeah.
also seeing my family be successful is something that I'm passionate about. So
Absolutely.
so I'm fortunate to be able to blend those two together, and maybe somebody from the next generation will have an opportunity like that. So um I do hope one of them steps into this role though.
And Kirk, what's the thing you enjoy most about the role that you have?
You know, I enjoy thinking about the future. Like where do we want to be, and what do we need to do to fill in to get everybody from where we are today to where we want to be down the road. So, it's with this financial fluency program. It's not like we want you to understand finance, right? It's like, how do you understand finance? Not only so that you can do your checkbook, buy a car or buy a house, but also you can understand what the business is more readily. You can understand what's happening in the economy and how it might play out into the business and things. So it's really preparing the next generation for what happens in their house, but then also what's happening with the family and then with the company at the national global level. So
And, getting to look at all these different companies which are, trying to build the future. What are some of the things that you're bullish on right now?
that I'm bullish on. Um, AI. I think that AI is going to be, there's going to be a lot of things that come from AI, but I think there's a lot of money flying around AI right now, and I think it's going to be a little bit longer than people anticipate to figure out how AI will benefit us. Um, so, anyways, we're being a little bit cautious with AI stuff at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, like what you're doing is amazing. Two different, totally different areas, like fields. Are you planning to continue with both business?
I am. Um, you know, I try to balance, we talked about it before. I try to
Yeah,
balance, how
yeah,
much time am I putting into the bird watching business, which is the passion really.
yeah,
But, the family business is what drives the opportunities.
yeah,
And so with that, making sure I always have enough time to focus on the business. Like I've been asked to guide more tours and I've said no to that, just trying to balance the family time and work and all that stuff. So, um, yeah, but I, I think to keep my excitement, as you said, to be re-energized.
yeah,
I think that I need to keep the bird watching business going. I do wonder how long I'll be able to do that before I
yeah,
get to a point where I'm kind of like, maybe I don't have the same energy I used to.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm really fascinated because you said to do something that you love. But is there ever a risk that if you go all in and your work becomes something that you love, that you'll lose the passion for it?
I think there is, and I think, I have friends that are guides, right? And like their life is guiding. They're always trying to get more clients and lead more tours. Like I have a friend that I think he used to lead 7 or 8 bird tours a year. Maybe it was closer to 10. That's a lot of time
Mm,
away from
mm,
home.
mhm.
So I think if I was doing that, it would feel much more like work than passion. So, I'm in a fortunate situation where I feel like I get to make that as big as I want while keeping it interesting, um, and still focusing on the family business and moving that forward.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds good. Like, if you can keep that passion project more of a holiday for you, that would
Best of
work
both
well, right?
worlds.
Right, right. Yeah, and if I go off and lead a birding tour, I'm more apt to go do a family trip and not focus so much on the birds.
Keep everyone happy. I like that, Co.
Yeah.
And I suppose looking towards the future, what's the vision for you?
You know, um, I mean, I feel like with the bird watching business, it's keeping it the same, like that 2 to 3 tours a
Yeah.
year. You know, maybe doing a little bit more advertising to get people to hire me to go birding around Lake Tahoe. But with the family business, um, you know, uh, I serve on the board of one of our startups, staying engaged with, some of our startups. Um, when at some point down the road, my dad will decide to retire. I don't know when that'll be. It could be 5, 10, who knows,
Yeah.
years from now. But so I'll be stepping into that chairman role at some point.
Mm.
And, you know, with that, the vision there, as we talked about, I really hope that, um, I can take my personality and, um, be able to implement some different things at the company that I believe allow it to grow into its next phase of development. My dad was there for the startup, to have that energy, that passion, the risk taking that really put us in a good place. And I hope that I can step into that role of, you know, smoothing things out a bit, keeping things more stable for the family, but still keeping it on a positive trajectory of growing the company.
It's fantastic. And I suppose looking back on this incredible journey and given your definition of success was largely around setting a goal and doing it and really trying to live up to and exceed the legacy of your family. Do you feel successful?
Oh, at times. Um, you know, um, like I said, we just did that retreat with the board, and I do feel like I was trying to, lead the family towards here's some values around financial stuff that we might not have talked about, but for the next generation, we're trying to be much more intentional about. Of you know, what's the purpose of this money? Why are we in business together? Why do we do these things together? Um, and it's to support each other, to be able to make that message more clear to the family um, down the road. So I think I see myself being successful and being able to bring the family together. At first, it might be like, why are we doing this? What are we doing? But I do feel like towards the end, people were more cohesive around the ideas of what I was thinking. Um, so I think there's little successes that I'm having down the road. So I hope to continue having those and see where it takes the family.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think what you're doing is fascinating because it's sort of complement in a way. Like you're doing a very when it's come to finance business, you're very focused on investment strategy, etc. When it's going to more bird watching, it's more quite relaxing, right? You're with the nature, you're breathing fresh air, so it's like
Holistic.
yeah, it's just you have the both world.
Yeah, well, I mean, but with the bird watching tours, the multi-day tours, like there's
Yeah,
like 16-hour days
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
So it's like, you know, people want to know where's the next bathroom,
yeah,
when
yeah.
are we going to
Can
eat
be
next?
tough.
Then I've got to drive and like, is there traffic, construction? So there's a lot of planning that goes into it. But at the same time, once we get out of the van, start
It's
looking for the birds, then all that falls away and you focus on what's in front of you and the fresh air and all that
yeah,
stuff. So
yeah, yeah. That's amazing.
And Kirk, this has been an incredible conversation, but throughout, I've been trying to jot down what I think are the core traits which have led to what I would say is quite a successful life. And I'd like to share them with you.
all right.
The first one is you're very much a deep learner. And I think, that shows whether, it's in your bird watching life, understanding all the birds that are out there, or in the investments. You have to understand so many different industries to make practical investments in them. And I think more than that, a really great sign of a deep learner is someone who can teach. And I think throughout your career, you've really utilized that ability to distill concepts and teach them to others. And I think that's a really important trait, which has led you to where you are. The next one is definitely humility. And I think that transition back into the investment space was a great example of that. You had the humility to say, I don't know this space. I'm not an expert at this. I know I have a great team, so I will empower them to do their best work. And I think that's really important. Given it's your family, you could have come in and said, okay, I'm the new hotshot here. You guys have to listen to me. But you had that humility and let the team
Humbleness.
do their work. The next one is authenticity. And I think this is probably, my favorite one for you because you really understand what your personality is, your personality type, your strengths, and you play to those. We mentioned being the quiet leader, and I think that's a great example. You realized that was an innate part of your personality, and you kind of worked towards that and utilized that in the best way possible. And then the last one is just your ability to balance. And I think I'm so in awe of your ability to, work in finance and then also have this beautiful connection to nature and family. I think it's such a sustainable way to live because, it avoids a lot of burnout.
Yeah. So I had the experience of knowing Kirk, and as you mentioned, Dylan, like authenticity is the key thing. Always, I can relate it to Kirk because Kirk is what you see, what you get sort of guy, and he is very consistent, and he's someone always stays same. So his authenticity is what I really experience working with you or studying together with you. Thank you, Kirk. It was a really nice conversation, and thank you for spending some time with us. It's lovely to know your story.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. It's been my pleasure to talk with you guys, and I I think you guys did a great job of figuring out who I am.
And Kirk, if people want to learn more about you and what you're doing, or want to go on a bird watching tour with you, where's the best place for them to find out some more information?
Yeah, redtailadventures.com is the best place to take a look, and you can find my email and phone number on there.
Sure.
Excellent. Well, Kirk, thank you so much. And for our listeners, if you've gotten something out of today's episode, it would mean the world if you can like and subscribe. It helps us get to more and more ears. And if you want to see all of our inspirational content, you can see all of our episodes over on our website, thequestforsuccesspodcast.com. And with that, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.